I'm Tommy Salmons. This is Year Zero. Okay, here we go. What is going on, everybody? I hope everybody's having a wonderful second week of 2020. Doesn't appear that Donald Trump is having a really great time. And we will talk about that here in a minute. But other than that, it looks like it's going to be an all right year. Just a really quick aside before we get into any of the stuff I want to talk about today. I would like to pay respects to one of my best friend's mom who passed away over the weekend. It's a grave loss. She was a wonderful woman. I had known her since I was 15 years old. I'd always called her mom. She was like a second mother to me, and she was extremely sweet and always looked out for us. And even though as teenagers we were a little wild and we gave her a hard time, we always loved her to death. And her absence from this world is a great loss for a great many people. And on the heels of Pinky dying, and now she's passed away. It's been tough, but we must move on. She would have it no other way. She would want us to keep on trucking. So we move into another year having lost and in some cases gained. So I over Christmas, the Sunday before Christmas, I met my granddaughter, my first granddaughter. And so that, was a joyous occasion to get to spend some time with her. So, the circle of life keeps on, and there's nothing we can do to stop it. So, let's move on. Let's get into some of this stuff we're seeing going around about Soleimani and the disinformation, and statism in general is quite a disease. Appealing to authority, like I said the other day, it's enough to drive a man crazy. All these children in adult bodies have the mindset of children, appealing to authority, begging daddy government to save them. Please save me. Please. We can't do it on our own. Liberty is too dangerous. And I just think about Thomas Jefferson when he said, I prefer the problems associated with too much liberty than the problems associated with too much government. And that's just kind of how I feel about things. But, yeah, some people are just too scared. They're scared to live a life of personal responsibility and to move on and not beg for security from potential evils, not even proven evils, but potential evils in this world. So as we get past this assassination of Soleimani, there's obviously, as days move on and tick past us, there's more information coming out, more disinformation coming out, and there are lies abundant on social media if you pay any attention to what the hell's happening there. The most prominent lie that has been told since the very beginning is that the protests in Iraq at the U.S. Embassy were held by Iranian forces, and so I've heard a few people say that Soleimani had, issued the go-ahead to carry out these protests, in which there was, some damage to the outside of the building, but nothing sensitive, nothing, they didn't breach the visitors gate. They were held at bay, setting fires, throwing water bottles, throwing rocks. And, really doesn't seem like much of a big deal. If it were to happen if it were to have happened in Washington State, in Seattle or Portland, Oregon, or somewhere like that, Antifa carrying on like that, we probably wouldn't hear much of it. And it's been happening in France for over a year. You don't hear much about the Yellow Jacket protests going on there. It's happening in Hong Kong. It's no big deal. So it's a protest. People want occupying armies out of their country, and who could blame them? I don't necessarily blame them. There's an invading force, an occupying military breaking the laws of the land, laws of your particular nation, as well as international law. I don't know. I don't see any reason why we shouldn't expect them to try to run the United States out of there. And, Iran is going to assist the expulsion of U.S. troops from the region as much as they possibly can. They'll attempt to influence the Iraqi parliament, and and they might have had a little bit of influence whenever it came to the election that was held on Sunday, in which the Iraqi parliament elected to ask the United States troops to leave their country. This will be a process continuing on. I think it was a resolution and not necessarily a declaration And so there are going to be more steps. And I saw somebody say the other day, and it was pretty funny, is how ironic is it that the United States committed war crimes in Iraq in order to install a democracy that turned around and elected for the United States to leave Iraq. So, but that says it all about U.S. foreign policy. It's a fucking disaster. And it hasn't gotten any better. As far as the death of Soleimani, from stories I've read, the Moon of Alabama had a story on this. Antiwar.com did a story on this. Southfront did a story on this. I think I saw NBC News cover it. I'm not sure. But the narrative is that Soleimani was beckoned to Iraq not only for the funerals of the Kabai Hezbollah militia members that had been killed in the U.S. attacks on military facilities in Iraq, but he was there on a diplomatic mission to end the war in Yemen and to find peace between Iraq, Saudi Arabia, and Iran. That Donald Trump knew that he was there on a diplomatic mission, that Donald Trump had convinced the temporary dictator of Iraq, Mahdi, to host the peace conference or, meeting or whatever it was going to be, however you want to say it. And then as soon as his plane landed, he bombed him, which, I don't know, pretty chicken shit, you ask me. You're bombing a guy that had been fighting alongside American troops to destroy ISIS and Al-Qaeda in Syria and Iraq because Iraqis held protests, and your intelligence agencies, which have a long history of lying, came to you without evidence and told you that Soleimani had ordered the protests. Okay, so he ordered the protest. He didn't order suicide bombing. He didn't order a car bomb. He didn't order the invasion of barracks. He didn't order the bombing of the USS Liberty. That was Israel a long time ago, if you don't know that. He ordered, if at best, he ordered a protest. So the intelligence agency realized really quick that the assassination of a general wasn't going to be accepted from the world on the world stage just for some protest. So then they started saying, well, we expected him to carry out attacks on military facilities. Well, leave. Why are you there? Who cares? Leave. You don't want Americans to be attacked in the Middle East? Leave the Middle East. Right? Like, it's not that difficult. It's not like Shia or Iranians are coming to the United States carrying out attacks. Those are Sunnis. That's Wahhabists. Those are the Saudis guys. Those are our guys, the United States guys. You know those guys that we've been arming, training, and funding since the 80s? Yeah, those are the ones carrying out attacks internationally, not Iranians, not Shia. Yeah. It's not Yazidis or however you say that. It's Sunnis, Sunni Wahhabists. They're the ones carrying out international terrorist attacks. Al-Shabaab, Boko Haram, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, Al-Nusra. The groups the CIA created in the 80s and issued visas to in 2001. Those groups, those are the guys. So if you want to say this is about 9/11, like Mike Pence tries to say, you have a lot of spinning to do to try to figure that out. You want to talk about, we have to attack the Shia, we have to attack Iran for 9/11, an attack they had nothing, absolutely nothing to do with, while we fly as Al-Qaeda's Air Force in Yemen, as we commit treason. That's what he's saying. As we commit treason, fighting alongside the group that carried out the attacks on 9/11, we have to go and start a war with people that had nothing to do with 9/11 and accuse them of being involved in 9/11. As Scott Horton pointed out, even Dick Cheney didn't try to do this. When they were painting Iraq as being involved in 9/11, which they weren't, they quickly backtracked from that narrative as soon as they started the war. They didn't even try to paint Iran as part of the conspiracy. So just coming out today in 2019, 18 years later, after the Afghan papers have come out and been published, and everybody can see that for the last 18 years, you've lied to keep the United States in Afghanistan engaged in war for your own power and purposes, that it had nothing to do with the attacks on 9/11, that it was all a lie, that it was all spin. And all these men and women that lost their lives, these young boys, these young men, these young women that came back suffering from PTSD, that ended up committing suicide, it was all based on lies. It was for nothing. It was for nothing. It was all so that the elites, the political class, could increase their power and their wealth. And as soon as they come out and say, well, Iran, it's bought. It's believed. Hook, line, and sinker. It's believed. We can trace it back and find when Colin Powell and George W. Bush apologized for lying about weapons of mass destruction in Iraq and starting that war, Iraq War III. We can trace that. But yet, well, now they say Iran, so it has to be true. We can go look at last year when the whistleblowers, the OPCW whistleblowers came out proving that there had not been a gas attack in Syria. But now that they say Iran, it has to be true. We can go all the way back to the Gulf of Tonkin, World War I, babies on bayonets. None of it was true. But, has to be true. It's Iran. Has to be true. Now, my dad's told me this before, and I understand where he's coming from, because ever since the 70s, there's been nothing but negative propaganda coming out about Iran. And unless you've read in detail and in some amount of detail into what the actual conflict in Iran and between the United States is all about, then it's easy to just accept, like what you heard for 40 years, 50 years, whatever. And he told me one time, he was like, "Well, I have a hard time believing anything that Iran says. I just don't believe them." And I'm like, "Yeah, but the United States is lying to you every single day to get you to support a war, somewhere, whether it's Korea or Vietnam or World War I or Gulf War I or Venezuela or Bolivia or Colombia or Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Yemen, Ukraine. It's all lies. Constant lies. Trump's colluding with Russia. We have to go to war with Russia. Trump comes out, oh, Ukraine interfered in an election. We have to go to war with Ukraine. Fucking Iran is protesting the embassy. Okay. So, leave. Leave. Get out of there. I don't know. Like, Mexico was being occupied by a force that was bombing Mexican military facilities. I don't think the U.S. would just show up and protest. I don't think that would be the United States response to someone occupying Mexico and bombing Mexican military facilities. I think there would be a lot worse than a protest. Yet, America invades Iraq, overthrows the secular Ba'athist party run by Saddam Hussein, works with Soleimani, installs a Shia government, recognizes the PMU and PMF forces, these militia that are working together, Yazidi, Shia, Sunni, all very, not discreet. What do you call it? It's our strength. Oh, I don't know. Whatever. Diverse. That's it. Because it's a strength. It's in itself, it's a virtue, which is why I can't remember it, because I'm far from virtuous. But like democracy is a virtue. Diversity is a virtue. Yeah. Dick sucking is a virtue. Demonizing people is a virtue. All the virtuous shit that the U.S. stands for today. Anyway. So, I don't even remember where I was going. But anyway, United States would definitely not just protest the embassy of a foreign invasion. Oh, yeah. And then, so we go into Iraq, we overthrow this secular Sunni Ba'athist regime of Saddam Hussein. We install the Shia government alongside Soleimani, actually worked hand in hand with Soleimani to install a regime that was friendly with Iran. And intentionally did that, recognized all these militias working together as the rightful military of Iraq. And then we want to turn around and say, well, these are Iranians. These are Iranian militias. And, okay, they're Shia. They might have some ties to Iran. They do live next door to Iran, Baghdad and Tehran aren't that far apart. It'd be like a Texas militia being accused of, you know, being in bed with New Mexico. It's like, okay, so it's like, whatever. They're friendly, okay? It doesn't mean Iran controls them. It means nothing, And if people are going around saying, okay, this has been in Iraq, it's been a proxy war between Saudi Arabia and Iran for, years, and the United States and Iraqi militaries, our ally that we, put into position and assisted in taking control of the government. And we assisted, along with Iranians, along with Soleimani, we assisted Iraqi military in fighting ISIS and Al Qaeda. So those bad guys that keep committing terrorist acts internationally, those guys, Soleimani was actually fighting them, not funding, arming, and training them. That was the CIA doing that. So I would imagine that Al Qaeda and ISIS are kind of excited about Soleimani's death. That would, stands to reason that they would be pretty excited. And what about the war in Yemen? What's going to happen there now? Soleimani was there to find a peaceful solution with with Saudi, meeting with Saudis and find a peaceful solution for Yemen. Not because Iran is in Yemen, but because Houthis are Shia, and they are, able to be influenced by what Iran says. Now, this doesn't mean that everything would come to an end if Iran gave an order to the Houthis, because Iran warned the Houthis not to start this war, not to get involve themselves in this war. But Houthis are separatists, and they wanted their own government in the north of Yemen. And Saudi Arabia was just unwilling to accept that. So, that was basically a Yemeni civil war that the Houthis won, and Saudi Arabia involved itself, along with Al Qaeda, in order to throw the Houthis out of power, because they did not want to deal with a Shia regime there in Yemen. Basically, they wanted to control the ports in Yemen, and they knew that the Shia Houthi regime controlling those ports would be damaging to Saudi Arabia's business from those ports. Basically is what's going on there. So as Saudi Arabia sends Al Qaeda into Yemen to fight the Houthis, the United States again flies as the Air Force for Al Qaeda. So would Soleimani and representatives of Saudi Arabia be able to end the Yemen war? Possibly. But it doesn't mean that it would turn into a utopian dream, a peaceful country. I mean, the Al Qaeda is a terrorist organization. They carry out attacks everywhere. So it doesn't mean that they wouldn't continue to carry out attacks on whatever the solution, wherever the Houthis ended up being, whatever region they ended up ruling, would probably continuously be under attacks by Al Qaeda. it probably wouldn't be under the direction of Saudi Arabia and the United States. So does the death of Soleimani, this is what we have to look at now, does the death of Soleimani mean that the war in Yemen escalates? I don't know. I don't know if the number two that stepped in, the deputy that stepped into Soleimani's shoes immediately upon his death, is as willing to negotiate and is as willing to sit down and talk with Saudis about the war in Yemen and to end that conflict and find some sort of peaceful solution. We don't know. We're going to have to wait and see. It's unfortunate that this could have stopped a genocide of innocent women and children in Yemen, could have lifted all sanctions from Iran, created trade routes, and lifted blockades on Yemen, allowing food and medicine to get into the country at a quicker rate. And so these innocent people that are affected by all these policies are constantly hoping, I would guess, I would venture to say that these people are hoping that the governments that continue to use them as pawns would, stop. Yeah, would just fucking chill out. A lot like a lot of us United States citizens wish the United States government would just fucking stop. Why the fuck you keep wasting money and lives and resources on wars you can't win? Why? I mean, what's the point? But we all know it's for the health of the empire, not the good of the country. So, as we see the continued talking points from the conservatives and the Democrats, both of which are part of the war party, we find that the religion of the state is alive and well. I've seen a few people questioning the relevance of the assassination of Soleimani. I've seen a few people wondering if there was any good that was going to come out of this, and that if it was really a valuable strategic move on the part of the United States to assassinate a general, labeling him a terrorist, which I can't tell you how excited I am to find out that military generals are now considered terrorists. That makes libertarians and anarchists' job that much easier when opposing war, because now we have now we can just call it as it is and call these people terrorists. But there's still a vast majority of people, and Beatrix, my wife, found this out the hard way the other day when she was talking to somebody online about all this nonsense. And the man said, I quote, "I love my country more than my brother's life." And that is just the epitome of the religion of statism. It doesn't matter how many times you show and prove without a shadow of a doubt to these people that they are constantly being lied to, year after year after year, being lied to further the expansion of empire. And they still refuse to question, just question. I'm not even saying become anti-war, just question what you're being told. You know, I think it was Jefferson that had that quote, question with boldness everything, including the existence of God, for if there were a God, he would much rather honest questioning than blindfolded fear. Something along those lines. I probably screwed that up somewhere, but it was along those lines. And these people don't even have the ability. They are so encompassed in the worship of the state that they can't even conjure up enough intellectual curiosity to question the actions of the state. They must just obey. They must just worship. They must sit at the feet of their master and beg for scraps. They have no spine. They have no mind of their own. It is just sycophantic worship. And these people, over the years, have replaced whatever God they possibly grew up believing in with the deity, the golden calf that is the state. They can't imagine that any impurity comes from the benevolence of this institution. And it's pretty disgusting. It's intriguing because I guarantee you that these same people that sit at the foot of their masters and beg for scraps, apologizing for nothing, defending everything, would never give the same courtesy to their wife or their children if they found out one day that their wife had been lying to them for 18 years, had been carrying on an affair for 18 years, lying about her membership to the social club or the gym, and had been having an affair in that period. 3 weeks later, when she popped up and said, "Hey, I'm going to go to the gym," they wouldn't be like, "Oh, well, you're obviously going to go to the gym. So obviously, that's what you're going to do." Because you certainly wouldn't lie again. It's not like you're pathological and you're lying. I've been laying the dick to you pretty good, so it's not like you could possibly be looking to have another affair or continue the previous one. They're so short-sighted. History started yesterday for many of these people. If you point out the nuances of Middle Eastern policy and politics and war, they refuse to accept anything other than Muslim bad, U.S. good. Okay. You're just fortunate enough to have been born in the U.S., not that you had choice in the matter. And these children that are being slaughtered by the thousands were unfortunate enough to be born in a third world country that the U.S. uses for target practice. So it doesn't really register in my mind the cognitive dissonance that it takes to defend the evils of the state. But it never surprises me the lengths to which people will go to defend the religion of the state. Their worship of the state never shocks me, never catches me off guard. It's sad, it's disgusting, it's despicable, makes me sick to my stomach at times. I laugh sometimes because it's so predictable, but it never shocks me. The idea that an institution of men with a history of such tragedy and violence can be lifted up to and exalted as if it's a god exposes something chilling about humanity. Especially the fundamentalist nature of their deification of objects and items and celebrity. I saw it during the Obama administration, with his voting base. But it's becoming even more clear day by day with the Trump administration, as Trump continues to not fulfill the promises he made during the campaign, to entrench himself in the swamp instead of drain it, to not get the United States out of wars, to commit war crimes that, while not at the level of some of the past war crimes, such as Nagasaki or Hiroshima, are definitely along the level of Obama assassinating American citizens, or the CIA torture program. As a side note, if you haven't seen the movie The Report, or listened to the Daniel Jones interview with Jeremy Scahill, I highly recommend both. Very, The Report was a very good movie. A little bit too sympathetic to Dianne Feinstein, in my opinion, but for the most part, it was good. It was pretty factual. It was pretty accurate from everything I've read and understand about that time frame. And but yeah, so I it disgusts me in the same way that my wife gets disgusted at times with people who have struggled with addiction or relationships in their lives, and they'll say, I couldn't have done this without the Lord our God. And I've always told my wife, well, it's not much of a threat to me or you for them to believe that. There's utility in the belief of the supernatural or esoteric entities that are capable of lifting you up, giving you strength that you never thought you had within yourself. Even if you do it on your own, even if it's your own determination, if the idea of telling yourself that it is an external force gives you the strength to better yourself, it doesn't really bother me much. It's like, okay, you're not hurting anybody. But to project that same type of worship onto an entity built on conquest and violence is extremely dangerous. And I'm not being hyperbolic here. I'm drawing an honest comparison. This idol worship of the United States government as this benevolent being, incapable of doing wrong, perfect in its knowledge and its action, is the type of worship and acceptance that allowed for the concentration camps in Nazi Germany. It's the exact same type of idol worship and acceptance that allowed for the gulags in Russia and the Soviet Union. The turning a blind eye to the evils that are being carried out is the exact same thing as not speaking up whenever somebody just disappears from society, vanishes from a photograph they had previously accompanied Stalin in. Or sat idly by and watched without protest as hundreds of Jews were ushered in to a gas chamber and put to death. To sit idly by and watch evil occur and not only accept it, but defend it. It reminds me of that book by Clive Barker. It's a collection of short stories called The Inhuman Condition. And it was just about like horrible acts that individual humans participated in. One was called the Midnight Meat Train. I can't remember all the short stories in there, but there were quite a few. But the inhuman condition, where he talks about, he gets into serial killers and this, that, and the other. And, you know, you see the cult worship of serial killers from certain aspects. Now, I am extremely interested in serial killers, but I definitely do not worship these evil fucks. They are quite evil bastards, and they are much too similar to politicians for my liking. But I do find them interesting in their pathology and their methodology. I find it interesting to examine the way that they go about their business. And I have used some abstract characteristics of serial killers in developing characters and short stories I have written. So there is an interest there, but the cult worship that you find, the women, you know, that fall in love and try to get married to, or do marry, the serial killers after they've been caught and they're in prison, the celebrity that's cast upon them is quite disturbing to the vast majority of people. And most people do not understand it. But they're going through with the same type of idol worship and the same type of cult following when defending and worshiping and aggrandizing and exalting the state. They do the same thing. They excuse and defend any negative behavior as not their fault. It's somebody else's fault. And they enable the state to carry out the genocides and these wars, the wasting of human lives and trillions of dollars. When a pro-lifer tells you that they're against abortion because you could be aborting the next Einstein, well, I'm against bombing because you could be bombing the next Einstein. If you want to bomb in self-defense, fine. If you want to fight in self-defense, I don't dispute the necessity at times. But to offensively pursue the agency, the advancement of empire, and not only defend it, but worship it and exalt it and view it as the ultimate accomplishment, is sick and twisted in mirrors in much the same way, in my opinion, the apologists of Hitler, Stalin, Mao, Pinochet, you know, Caesar, whoever you want to, Genghis Khan, whoever you want to throw out there. It's a mirror image. It's just the modern equivalent of brown shirts. And I find it disgusting. I find it to be demented, pathological, twisted, sociopathic, and disturbing on multiple levels. And that's what statism is. That's what, in many cases, religion is. When you look at fundamentalist jihadists, which not all jihadists are fundamentalists, a lot of them are using religion as a way to lure in more numbers to recruit. It's a recruitment tool in many cases to grow their numbers. And it's used the same way in the United States. Except instead of convincing adults to join your ranks, you're raising your children in the church of the state as you send them to the government indoctrination facility known as public school. And after 13 years of being taught to worship the institution of murder that surrounds them, they are then cast off into its ranks to wear its uniform and die for its behaviors and its wealth. And I'm just not interested in being involved in such cult behavior, such disturbing line of thought. It is not it will never lead to freedom, peace, prosperity, or liberty. It is what brings down empires. It is what destroys societies. And we are in the late stages. I wouldn't expect to be around in 100 years and there to be the concept of the United States in any recognizable fashion as to how it exists now. And I can only hope that Iraqi parliament voting to expel U.S. troops from the sovereign government, from the sovereign land of Iraq, begins the dominoes falling. And we soon see Japan and Germany and Afghanistan, South Korea, and every other country in which the United States claims territory to build a military facility and police the world from, kicks them out, tells them to get the fuck out of here. We don't adhere to United States law. You are not our rulers. We are a free people. We are a sovereign nation, and we don't want you here anymore. You're no longer welcome. That's all I got. I'm surprised I kept my blood pressure down on this episode. I'm getting better at trying to talk calmly about things that I am very passionate about. As usual, go to bossbrosdiamonds.com for all your dabbing lifestyle needs. You need hoodies, shirts, pipes, whatever. bossbrosdiamonds.com. Check it out. And, enjoy all your dabbing essentials for the dabbing lifestyle. Just dab it. Go to libertarianinstitute.org. Don't forget to donate. Tuesday, January 7th, is the last day of matching funds up to $20,000. So if you haven't donated a couple of dollars to libertarianinstitute.org, go throw a couple of bucks their way, man. Let them get those matching funds and get some more writers in there at libertarianinstitute.org. And for all of your anti-war news, antiwar.com is where I go. That is the best place to find out what is happening all around the world. And if you haven't checked out Scott Horton's article from last night, Iraq War 4, ? Go check it out. It's a great history of Iraq and the wars that have been taking place in Iraq, led by the U.S. military. I'm sorry, Boogie. I didn't mean to hurt you, buddy. I was just trying to pick you up. I think I scared him more than I hurt him. All right. Anyway, that's all I got for y'all, man. I'm Tommy Salmons. Late.